Alright, another Vloggerheads video, response video to Frank, and I'm going to try to be really calm about this because he sort of doesn't get it at all, so I'm going to have to treat him like a little bit of an imbecile. Anyway, it says here, Eva, it's a no-brainer that suffering sucks. Now, Frank, you know, all of these videos, I guess you got some sort of hearing disorder now or something, but yeah, I mean, just layered in every one of these videos between me and Amadeus is all these signs that we're talking about that very thing. So it's obviously not a no-brainer for Amadeus guy, okay? It does require a lot of braining for him to accept that suffering isn't just a psychological fart, that it is a phenomenon that takes place in the world, that the construct of morality isn't all just made up, that there is a rational construct that we're obligated, that we're connected to. Because he just sort of, you know, he said the word amoral. You know, these are concepts that were in the videos. You don't know what that means? He's an amoralist. He called himself that. You don't get it? Anyway, if that's all you are trying to contend, then I think you have picked an incredibly easy subject. Look, Frank, we didn't pick the subject. Alright, Amadeus guy basically said, num, I'll eat whatever I like. I'll beat up whatever I like because it doesn't matter because I'm the king of the universe, and and that was his rational argument, okay? He came on here and argued that he doesn't have to care about anything, he doesn't have to worry about it, it's not his, he has no obligations to any sentient creatures on this planet, and his rationalization is because they're not, you know, they taste good. What will be next? Hot sauce is spicy. Yeah, well, Frank, again, you just really don't get it. But yeah, the argument was that stupid and idiotic. He's basically now conceded that, yeah, he doesn't want to argue it anymore, so he just gave up and placated the point that suffering sucks. But yeah, I had to do all these videos to extract the concession that suffering sucks. And it doesn't just suck for him, it sucks for all the other sentient creatures who experience suffering. And to equate rape and slavery with the whole human condition, with one specific example of an alien cat. Well, it wasn't really an alien cat, it was just a cat trapped under, it wasn't an alien tree, it was just a tree. Yes, it was an alien world. That is a ridiculous contrivance and diversion. See, now this is funny. No, you're the diversion, Frank. You're the one trying to divert the subject, which demonstrates an unwillingness to defend the original, very close and specific scenario. I don't have to defend it. Like I said, it was a premise of an argument. It isn't something I need to defend. I'm just merely stating you either get that or you don't get that. If you don't get that, it would be better to have a universe of smiley cows, I even said that, versus a universe of suffering kittens, then we have nothing to talk about. If you can't absolutely state with certainty, like, you know, the glove fits and you can convict, that it is a absolute truth, that if those are your two choices, yes, it's better to have a smiley cow. Smiley cow is better. That's all it was about, Frank. It was that you can make that rational determination based on our own witness testimony to what suffering is. Not that complicated, but it is apparently a requirement, and it's apparently a whole bunch of other people who just chimed in and said, oh, Amadeus is a very bright philosopher, blah, blah. You heard them, Frank. I think you did hear them. So I was required to make the argument, because I had to show these people that what you're advocating is that people shouldn't care unless they care personally. Yeah, unless they have a personal interest, there's no interest involved. The thing never has an interest. You just have interest. And that's a crock of shit. Or maybe you believe that. But, you know, whatever. Sorry about the long context. So, but yes, I'm going to try not to take anything Frank Tay says too seriously, because, see, he says here, sorry, you aren't getting it, Eva. No, Eva got it. You're not getting it, Frank. You stepped into a completely different conversation with your agenda, and your agenda, and then that's part of it too. I mean, I even pointed out in the videos, even the last video that you're responding to now, so you've heard the video, I talked about the scales, I talked about the integers, I talked about the necessity to define these constants, these values, so we can start to do this math, this ethical math. So you have to define what is valuable. The quanta. How many fucking times did I say it? The quanta of value. I said these words. And now you're pretending I didn't say them? I said them. You can't do the math until you go to the bottom, you go to the root, you find the foundation, the substance. Anyway, there's no point in me telling you all this, right? I should just fucking send this video private to Frank. But what the hell? You can watch it voluntarily. So really, yeah, if you get it, it's probably going to be horribly redundant.
Normally I would let something like this go, but I'm kind of in the mood to debate this, and since you've closed off so many avenues of legitimate discussion, and
I haven't closed off any avenues of legitimate. You want to discuss any fucking subject of ethics, whether it be in the economy or virtual reality or cybergenetics or yeah, I'll hit any of those subjects if you got an opinion you want to test against me. So this is just a pile of shit, Frank. The point is that we can't do the value subject. You're not, there's no, I don't think there's much point in doing it until we can establish at least some minimum constants. And I have to at least get the minimum from somebody that suffering sucks. If I can't get that, I'm not talking to him. I might as well waste my time talking to Charles Manson. You might do that. It might be interesting to you. I'm not really interested.
Things set up exactly so that you can win the situation, I thought I'd play your recent response video and give...
What's the big win, Frank? Oh, wow, yeah, I set up such a close scenario that I forced people to agree that suffering kitty sucks. Oh, wow, yeah, man, some victory that is. Yeah, I'm just so fucking full of happy pants right now. I just can't tell you. Oh yeah, I got one jackass on the fucking internet to concede suffering sucks. Whoop-de fucking goddamn do.
With the proper treatment. So, here we go.
I'm watching stupid Frank's video. I mean, this is just so stupid. I mean, I point out in my comment that you can't do thought experiments under these rules. You can't do experiments. Scientists can't do experiments if they don't follow a procedure, because then it...
Okay, scientists following a procedure has nothing to do with the situation you laid out. First of all,
it has to do with what thought experiments are. Einstein was a scientist, did lots of thought experiments. That's what you do. You take a scenario you can't construct in the lab and you put it out there. Like we can't do suffering kitty under a tree in the lab. And what we not only wouldn't want to, we don't need to is the point. So you do thought experiments because they're cheap. You say you're doing with chemistry and you're doing with physics and you're doing with biology, and you can start speculating about what will happen if we change scenario A, B, or C. We can even do computer models. But that's all it is, Frank. And you have to follow rules. If you don't follow the rules of the experiment outlined, then you're going to take the experiment into some other direction and you're not going to qualify the thing you're attempting to isolate through the experiment. I was attempting to isolate whether there was a quantum of value and whether it could be expressed or made more visible by isolating it inside the sentience of a simple little kitten suffering under a tree. I mean, really, it's a pretty good microscopic lens. Nothing wrong with that experiment.
Well, you dictated all the variables. You said they had to be a certain way. Well, let's say I'm willing to agree that if you just want to say a cat is trapped under a tree on an alien planet, that yes, that actually exists somewhere. But for you to dictate the property conditions of the tree, the planet, the cat, and everything, you've taken it out of the realm of a hypothesis, and the only way this could be is an...
You already made this video. Yeah, I guess you just don't get what thought experiments are. I mean, they're always confined by rules. If somebody can make up new rules, you've broken the thought experiment. It's not the point. You have to run it based on a set of circumstances. And if somebody can put new circumstances into the thought experiment from, these extraneous variables, then they can break any thought experiment. It's almost like anybody can break any philosophical discussion about anything by just saying the 3 pigs invented the universe, or we're in the Matrix. They can just make up a piece of shit and just say, well, with that new condition, all the other conditions change. If you change all the other conditions, and if you change them away from, like I said, the thing that was intended to get isolated. I mean, thought experiments go both ways too, Frank. That's another problem. Some are trying to do the microscope thing, and some are trying to do the telescope thing. All right? So some are trying to expand and see what are the possible outcomes, looking at the effects, and some are trying to isolate the causes, And that's what I was doing with mine. I was trying to isolate a cause. I was trying to find a root. Not a branch, a root.
Actual observation. I reject the idea that you could precisely name a cat is trapped under her tree in a planet, and the cat is a cute little kitty just like the kitties we have on Earth, and the tree is just like the trees we have on Earth, and there's nothing else to it.
Well, look, you can keep rejecting it. I'm just saying there's no point in having conversation without those rules. If I speculate on the mechanics of the universe, and I set up a domino theory, and I say something like, okay, well, let's say the universe is just all a bunch of dominoes, and they're invisible and have no material substance when they're in the up position, and when they're in down position, now they exist in the universe. All right? And so I set up this whole matrix. I set up a whole circumstance. I'd say, okay, the dominoes can only move with this. There's a clock speed. That's the speed of light, blah, blah, blah. I can explain the whole scenario, and then if I allow some idiot to say, well, what if the dominoes is filled with helium and is floating and stuff? I mean, if I had some asshole fucking break all the mechanics, okay, everything that was attempted to be illustrated is destroyed.
That. It's an alien world, and you have to take into account other variables. And you have to have the courage to defend the argument that you're making without closing all the doors just so you can win.
Well, again, that wasn't what I was doing. I wasn't closing any doors. I was merely saying before we start opening doors, let's figure out what a door is, what a doorknob is, what the wall is. Let's see what the fuck we got first before we start opening the doors, and then we'll know what doors are maybe just complete nonsense, and we can avoid going anywhere near those, the silly doors, where just Bozo the Clown pops out. So why don't we first figure out what we're opening, what we're attempting to accomplish, and then we can sit there and not waste so much time opening a door and having a little big-footed Amadeus pop out.
It can't be duplicated. It doesn't mean anything. The results don't mean anything. If you don't confine things to a reasonable boundary, then every single speculative example.
A reasonable boundary? How is you dictating every single condition so that only your point of view comes out the winner? A reason.
Well, that's not what I was doing. I don't, like I said, if me coming out a winner is because I create a simple mental image of cat suffering under a tree, and I come out the winner because, nobody can really turn that into a positive. Simple, isolated from all other circumstantial bullshit. A cat under a tree is just not, there's no rational anything that can make that a good thing. You have to create a context. You have to create some other competing good, or you have to turn the kitten into a Nazi, just as you did. You turned it into a little Nazi kitten and then said, okay, it's good, we're killing the Nazi kitten. I mean, that's not what the experiment, again, the experiment was just merely to point out you can't take that kitten in isolation, that one suffering experience in isolation by itself. When we finally put it in a vacuum and we can look at it clean, in a clean atmosphere, what do we see? And that was the purpose of the experiment, was to clear the atmosphere, to make, to provide the opportunity to see only it and just it, separated from all the other influences that would color it. And you've got to be able to understand this concept. I really almost say if you sincerely perverted this subject through ignorance, I mean, man, quit drinking.
Boundary.
Ample, anybody could provide. Everybody could just undo it by saying, well, what if? Right? So you could say, well, what if the woman was raped? And then the guy...
What's the point of having a discussion and bringing a topic to the table if you aren't willing to hear replies and you aren't willing to hear elaboration on what you're talking about? If you just want to...
The topic was amorality. The topic was, is value only an expression of a psychological disorder? The perception of value. Or does value exist as an absolute in the universe because it is created through the phenomenon of consciousness? So where there is a consciousness, there is a generator of value. Value has been generated. When you have a consciousness in jeopardy, vulnerable to suffering, you now have a generator of value. That was the discussion, Frank. You want to talk about something else, that's fine, but that was what we were talking about. Is, does value exist as a fact in the universe?
Here, oh yes, Gary, in this tight closed mind scenario that you've introduced, you win, of course, because you've closed all the other doors. If that's what you want to hear, congrats, fine.
Again, how did I close them? I respond to the Vital Finds video, and I pointed out how, yeah, these are questions you start building on top of once you get this kernel stuff down. These are the questions you start asking. Is how much pain is worth how much gain, and what gain? And what is gain actually made out of? So yeah, I've had those conversations, Frank. I got hundreds of videos on these subjects. So this trying to contrive this into me trying to escape those conversations is idiotic. I love those conversations. I'm perfectly fluent in them. Why would I run from them? If there's any kind of conversations I'm really, really excel at, it's those conversations. So this is just such bullshit.
I'll say, well, wait, but what if the rape was sold on eBay and they made $1 million and they gave it to a rape counseling charity?
Oh, so now, to emphasize how wrong your opponent is, you've taken a trapped cat and you've turned it into a rape victim. So, was the cat raped? And who raped the cat? Did the tree rape the cat? Is that why the tree was on top of the cat? You just take it into realm.
No, I just pointed out how you could take that scenario and put it into any thought experiment. You could take any thought experiment and say, well, but what if you could just add it. You don't need to, it doesn't have to be part of what's in your thought. Your thought experiment could be old lady, monkey, and gorilla sitting in a bar. Okay, that could be your thought experiment. And I can just add, okay, 13-year-old rape victim comes out of the back room. I mean, I could throw her in anywhere I want to by your standards, okay? Because you don't care to have a thought experiment that's confined by the rules of the physics to find out where that wedge of circumstance would go. You're saying it's okay to add all these other circumstances to a thought experiment. Well, then there's no point in running the experiment. The whole point of the thought experiment is to confine the funnel, the realm of possibility, to funnel something into a cause and effect, to see, well, what would happen if, let's see, if we outlawed all preposterous inheritance, and then we could think about, well, what would happen if there was no more people inheriting a life? Well, that's right, they'd have to go to work, and yeah, that would probably be a good thing, wouldn't it? Because then they could be doing something productive, like curing cancer, instead of, just riding around in Lamborghinis. Yeah, so that's the whole fucking point.
Of ridiculousness to enforce an argument that you weren't willing to defend by opening up its avenues of possibility.
Again. Like I said, you have just no excuse for missing the point here. This thought experiment was to isolate a circumstance, not to expand a circumstance. So this wasn't to break some sort of barrier of closed-mindedness. This was to create a piece of closed discussion, to create a kernel of rock-solid truth upon which the rest of the truth could be built on.
It's a good rape. I mean, anybody could do this to every single way that anyone would try to isolate a...
No, not everybody could do this to every single certain way. People could elect to employ this method if you are so close-minded to introduce something for supposed discussion that has all your little dominoes set up in a line. And if somebody moves one, oh no, you can't do that. I want my whole stack to fall just the way I've lined them up.
Well, look, Frank, you've brought up dominoes too. The whole point, though, is that, yeah, the whole point of putting dominoes into to a scenario, into a metaphor, is because they have a certain dynamic. They do a certain thing. Now, if they're all of a sudden not dominoes, then you've broken the purpose of using dominoes in the first place. You can't understand that? That if you break the physics of the controlled experiment and you're changing and you're putting little Red Riding Hood comes in, and I mean, there's just no point now. Now the whole thing has been broken. I mean, not to be able to get this, that the whole reason you use these confinements is the whole point is to narrow the realm of possibility. That's what you're trying to do.
Well, then somebody could say, no. I think the proper way to respond to something like this is to take into account something that you've disallowed. That you've said, oh no, if you go down this road, then I'm proven false. So you can't go down that road.
Look, this is like you could have an argument about black and white. Okay? You want to have a discussion, a comparison of black and white. And then somebody comes in with their little nitpicky and minutia bullshit and starts saying, oh, but the white actually has 0.0008% of blue in it, and the black is short, 0.0007% of red. It doesn't have enough red pixels in it. And they could play this stupid goddamn game. The point is, you were talking about black and white as concepts of separation, and now somebody has polluted the discussion by saying white isn't really white. Okay, it's like a black man, let's say, 100 years ago, who might have been of mixed race, right? Or you can call him a white man if you want. He could have been in this bizarre purgatory where he's technically of blood of one race, but he appears to be another race. So now we're going to play some game about, well, now the black man isn't a black man anymore, right? And the white man isn't a white man anymore. We'll just look at their genetics and say, well, no, you're 10% black, so you're black. I'm just saying that can you see how that would be really destructive if all you're attempting to do is to establish what the differences are between black and white.
Circumstance. And the whole point of this conversation that I'm having with this stupid asshole Amadeus is about the fact that we're trying to figure out if there is any such thing as an absolute kernel of value. If there is a quanta, I use that word, a quanta, like in physics, a littlest bit, okay, that everything is made out of. And I'm arguing that there is a little bit. There is this thing, this quanta called suffering. It's called a negative set.
Okay, now this has taken a shift because the interpretation I gleaned from what you were originally saying wasn't whether suffering exists or not, but whether you could say, yes, in this situation, the cat trapped under the tree, it is a bad situation.
Yeah, well, why didn't you just stop right there, okay? Because obviously your impression was wrong. And I don't think it was justifiably wrong. I could go back through the video chains with Amadeus, and we will be able to find all the instances where he did the amoralist thing and I did the, well, look, you have to accept the suffering thing. There's no grounds for conversation, in my opinion. You can't do ethics math without anything to put in the math.
You can recognize the creature's pain and call the situation overall bad. That's what I took from what you originally said. Somehow it's got diverted to the subject of, oh, can we acknowledge...
Now you're saying we diverted the subject, Frank. Now isn't that taking on an awful lot for yourself? I mean, should we all put it to a vote? And then let's have a trial, okay? And I'll go through all my video. I have to earn some money to do this, though. I'm really not doing it for a prize. But yeah, I'll go through all my clips and point out all the little pieces in those clips that clearly demonstrate what me and Amadeus were arguing about, which is whether or not there is such a thing as an absolute truth regarding value. That was the substance of the argument.
The fact that suffering exists if we don't literally see the suffering. Well, no, that's not what I'm talking about. You want to talk about it? We'll go right ahead here.
Well, look, asshole. I mean, you come into our conversation and now are telling us that we have to go where you're going and that somehow we are being terrible assholes if we don't let Frank set the agenda now. So, I mean, you're just so out of bounds here. Man, this is like what? It's like you walk into a funeral and say, I'm declaring this a wedding. Fuck you people. Get that dead shit out of here. Come on. Let's drink. I mean, that's what you... Fuck you.
Itself In and of itself. In and of itself. Not in the context of selling videotapes, not in the context of some other bullshit. No, in and of itself.
Why would you introduce something that's just a vacuum? Isn't it connected to anything else in the universe? You'd win.
No, yeah, why would that? See, so again, and you'd say that to a chemist? Why would you introduce something into a vacuum? Oh, and he'll say, oh, because that's the only way we can actually isolate the thing and see it and know what we're dealing with. Because as soon as we allow something else in there, it's going to fuck with it and it's going to change its properties. So the only way we can know what it is that we have to separate it from all the other crap.
Every single point that you elected to argue, if you said, no, it's not connected to anything else, it's just a vacuum, you can't look at anything else, you can only look at this, I'm closing all the doors of your argument, here's what it is. Well, of course, you want to talk about unfair, you can present anything that way, and it'll come...
Yeah, again, and that's the whole point of it. The whole point of it was to just put Suffering Kitty on the stage and just say, everybody look at Suffering Kitty. Now, do we really need to have a trial now? I mean, can I just file a motion to dismiss? Yeah, we can all concede Suffering Kitty sucks, right? Sitting there on the stage, Suffering Kitty's not a good thing. We don't have to go through a whole fucking lengthy argument and prove all kind of logical 3-squared triple brain cell neuron fuckosis, right? We don't have to go through a whole bunch of crap to sit there and fucking get this figured out. That Kitty on stage, Kitty Suffering sucks.
Well, to your advantage because you're the one who set everything up.
A negative thing. Yes, it can be. As I stated in my videos, there are ethical equations to be defined. The value equations can be done once you have the math to put into the equation. And then you can talk about things like, well, is it justified to have 100 years or 200 years of slavery because you gain this huge bonus of huge productivity and future advancement at an accelerated rate. So maybe somebody can make this...
I'm not interested in pulling the world into this. I'm not interested in making this about slavery, about rape, about whatever else you want to put in.
Whatever, Frank. So you now you're saying I just opened the window too many fucking doors here. I said that once you have this kernel of understanding of what value is, I'm saying the quantum math will now let you take this energy equation in all kinds of different directions because now you know what the quanta is. And so now you can evaluate all kinds of situations in the world and try to figure out whether or not our presumptions of cultural stagnant presumptions are true or false. You can do all sorts of analysis now. So now I've opened all the fucking goddamn doors, and now you complain I opened too many doors. I mean, this is just such fucking bullshit. You only look where Frank tells you to look. Now, I mean, Amadeus only thinks suffering exists when he sees it. And you apparently only think a subject exists when you see it. If you don't see it, it doesn't fucking exist. You don't have to pay attention to it. If you see people looking somewhere else and having a conversation somewhere else, you're assuming they're talking about you. Fuck you.
Seeing the exact example you gave of a cat trapped under the tree. Now, since you said, oh no, I can't consider the possibility that since these are trees on an alien world that might also have feelings or some sentience too, I can't address that.
You can address that all the fuck you want. Once we've established this kitten under a tree is suffering. Once I got that concession, you can talk all you want about all kinds of scenarios. I don't even think kitten trapped under a tree is all that terribly interesting. Once we have established that. It's not a fantastically interesting thought experiment except for the one singular purpose it had. Jesus. I mean, I'd rather have thought experiments about, well, what if we all had 25-foot penises? That, to me, would be a lot more interesting.
I can't address the possibility that maybe since this is an alien cat, it actually has super sharp claws and they've been destroying and abusing these trees. No, nothing like that. It has to be a cute furry kitty trapped under a wood tree. And even when I took at it at that angle, I presented something that is very logical. You say, oh no, you can't introduce this. Oh, everything I said exists in a vacuum. It's not connected to anything else, and rape and Hitler and blah, blah, blah. Well, here we go.
Yeah, well, I'm still, like I said, so Frank, you're just so off base here. You didn't get what was going on. You barged in off subject, and you're complaining. It's just quite amazing. You rude fucktard goes farting into somebody else's house, eats their dinner, shits on their couch, and then it complains that, how come you people didn't vacuum? What the fuck?
Ludicrous argument, and then you have to sit there and balance that and argue that, okay? Because now you'll have a number to put into the scale, and say, well, what's worth more, the future or the present? What's more valuable? 500 years of future?
Oh, come on. The future or the present? Now, what are you dragging in to support? This started with a cat under a tree. You took it to rape. Then you...
Look, asshole, I was giving you examples of the other questions you could ask when you were talking about some other subject. I just gave you examples that these are thought experiments. Yes, Frank, we can talk about this, and we can talk about that, and we can talk about that. When we're done talking about this, you stupid asshole! I mean, really, you build a building. You know what you do first, Frank? You level the ground, and you put it on a good foundation. Yeah, you do that fucking first, asshole. You don't fucking, drive your Mercedes onto the non-penthouse and put up your umbrella and do all that shit when you haven't even laid the first fucking stone.
You took it into the fate of humanity and slavery, No. If nothing is connected to the cat under the tree and you just want to argue that in the vacuum, you can't suddenly connect the whole world to the vacuum argument that you're making.
I didn't. I said if you want to. I didn't say I was. I didn't say I wanted to do this. I didn't say I had any need to break the thought experiment and go off in another direction. I was just giving you an example that there's lots of directions that can go. But that's not what we're doing right now, Frank. We're doing this right now. We're doing the foundation thing right now, Frank.
Future prosperity or 100 years of pain and suffering. So maybe this generation should do more sacrificing. Maybe we should eat gruel and work 40 or 70, 80, 90, 100-hour weeks and die when we're 35 years old so we can make the world...
It doesn't turn into Orwell's 1984 simply because somebody presents a response to what you're saying.
Well, look, I'm just arguing that there's lots of these presumptions that we have about what life is and what it has value. Again, people will say World War II was horrible, but you can run thought experiment scenarios where maybe if we didn't have World War II when we had it, we would have had it 10 years later and the wrong side would have won. These are truths. Again, like slavery could be rationally, how much as I hate saying that word connected to it, defended in the sense that in the long term there'll be so much gain from it that it would be worth the horrible abuse that was perpetrated. I would argue that if that's a truth, if that's what you're going to live by, that life wouldn't be worth living because it's just an unacceptable taking. But that's different than the moral question of whether you gained more by living life this way, whether it was more efficient as a fact. You know, Frank, it's like the Jesus Christ scenario. You could if you could crucify one man to purge humanity of some cancer, it would be the rational thing to do. Whether it would be the just thing to do is a more complex question.
500 years ahead of us, five generations or 10 generations or 20 generations will live a better life because we sacrificed. Yeah, that's a whole different fucking subject, you goddamn cunt. I've just spent fucking goddamn 7 videos trying to argue with a jackass about whether there's a kernel of value.
If you just want to say whether or not there's a kernel of value in that situation, yes. Of course, on the surface, it looks bad. It looks like the cat suffering is a bad thing. Is that all that you wanted to say? Was that the complete
Yeah, that's all I was trying to do, was to establish it as a fact, that we can say this is beyond a reasonable doubt a truth, that sentient organisms experiencing sentient suffering is bad. And that's all I was trying to do, because this asshole was saying that's not true.
Substance of what you were putting forth? Did you not want any discussion to come from that? If so, it would have been a lot clearer if you said, guys, don't talk about this. This is all I want to say. Of course, there's a little kernel of truth in the fact that it appears to be a bad situation for the cat. I don't think that's where you originally wanted.
It's not. like I said, why would I want to have a conversation about whether or not poop stinks? I mean, I didn't ask to have that conversation. This idiot stood up and said, I don't think poopy stinks. That's what he did, and now I had to waste my time explaining to him why it's just a fundamental fact of poop, you stupid fucking asshole.
To present.
And you're doing this stupid shit that is you do after you figure out whether there's a goddamn math to be done.
Wait a minute. After, there only exists after. It's not like you pushed the tree on the cat. You came to a situation where you saw...
Look, all we have before we establish that suffering sucks, all we have is X, Y, Z, W. And so we're doing 2X plus 4Y plus 6Zs equals 20Ws. It all doesn't mean anything because we got to get rid of these W's, these X's, these Y's, these Z's, and we got to put a real number in there somewhere, something of some sort of substance, some sort of positive and negative reality before this math can mean anything. That was the point of the conversation, is to clear out some of these variables and replace them with something, a constant that has some sort of, that makes the math rational.
The cat pinned under the tree. These are your own words. This is what you presented. So if the cat's already pinned under the tree, what are you going to do? Land on the planet and hope that the surgical medical equipment that you have in your little space shuttle is going to be able to save the cat's life even though its spine has been crushed from being pinned under it?
I have no delusion that there's any way to ever get to the kitten. No, okay, that it's in another universe, let's say. It's in the multiverse. It's trapped in the multiverse. So whatever, Frank.
Tree, whatever you want to say. No, the cat's a goner. The point is, where can it go from there? The point is, let's say that this doesn't exist in some laboratory vacuum that you've created, but this might actually happen on some alien world. Isn't that the better application of what we're talking about?
And I've done this, hundreds of times where I talk about that. What would be your ethical obligations if you came across a planet and it was established in the thought experiment that when you ran the reliable computer models on the planet's wildlife, that it never came to any good? There was no intelligence ever evolves on the planet. It just spends billions and billions and billions of years of sentient creatures eating sentient creatures. So this might be, for somebody who has a little bit of a brain, a moral dilemma. Because should you allow that evolution just to perpetuate? It's just DNA way out of control. It will not produce Shakespeare. Does it have enough purpose to justify the carnage? This is an ethical question. I've done video after video after video exploring those ethical questions, Frank. So this is just patronizing nonsense to sit there and point your finger like I don't know what this mechanism is and how to use it effectively. No sale.
Whether you can fucking goddamn define the integers, you can't do any math if you don't have any fucking numbers. Right? And all you have is variables. You don't have any constants. You can't do any goddamn fucking value.
It's not about variables and constants. I'm not sure exactly where you're trying to take this. Okay?
I'm trying to take it that there is an absolute, like with math. There's a fact, a reality to morality. Okay, in ethics. And the truth about efficiency. Just like a car engine can be judged based on how much fuel it consumes versus how much useful work and friction it produces. And that we can make a value equation about whether this is a justifiable machine. I'm saying that in the value universe of these sentient creatures and their interaction, there's a functionality, an efficiency rating. We can come up with a little Energy Star efficiency rating. We call it the suffering star efficiency rating. So is the bad being outweighed by the delusions of good? And that's sort of part of the argument here, is that the whole good thing is sort of a delusion. We built a car, but we don't have any roads.
The situation you presented is very clear. It's a very clear equation. All that you want to do is close the doors so that what you're saying appears in the best possible light and nobody else can touch it. Well, you have
I'm just trying to establish that suffering is the gasoline, Okay, that's the gasoline, the thing we are consuming, that we have to purchase, so to speak, that we have to pay for, that goes into the engine. And now we can judge what the car is doing. Once we establish that it's running on gasoline, and we establish what the price of gasoline is, then we can start talking about how efficient the car is. But if you're not going to do that, if you're always going to keep the fuel behind the black curtain, there's no way to judge the efficiency of the car.
Going to let counter-arguments come into the equation. Otherwise, all you're doing is blowing smoke up your own butt.
Are you mad? You stupid fucking assholes. Oh, I forgot. I was going to play this video at the end of it. I haven't heard the rest of it yet.
That the same fate does not befall other cats. Now, when you look at it that way, in a theory that you already accepted, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. In this case, needs of the one.
Yeah, that's not what we were arguing at this particular time, is it? Is that what we're arguing, Frank? Is that what any of his videos have been about?
Actually, I saw you use as a specific reply in one of your recent Amadeus reply videos.
Yeah, I did, and I did it in the context of explaining that once we do this establishment of what value is, then we can start doing these questions about what is the functional efficiency of our oughts. It's about ought. See, this is a guy who says there's no oughts in the world. That's what amoral means. No oughts.
Needs of the many versus the needs of the few. So yes, I thought that was a very relevant point.
No, that's not what he hasn't even conceded that any of these things have needs except for the fucking observer. The observer is the only thing he's acknowledged has any fucking needs. Okay, that is, the observer needs to purge himself of his empathy and his sadness and his unpleasantness at watching the Jews suffer. Okay, but he doesn't concede that the fucking Jews are suffering, you stupid shit.
It's really quite a hollow victory if all that you're seeking, if your entire quest is based upon people saying, yes, they're suffering. Well, let's take that as a given.
Yeah, well, again, you're taking it as a given. I would have liked to have taken it as a given. That's all I wanted from him, was the concession that can we start from this premise that suffering sucks. He wouldn't start from that premise, Frank. God damn it, you're so fucking off subject. That was exactly what the fuck was being argued. He claims the Jews don't have any suffering quality. Only the observer has the capacity to suffer.
Yes, in this situation that you're presenting, there is suffering. But where does it go after that? Where does it go after it's observed?
Yeah, like I said, all those questions are open. I'm not opposed to having conversations about all kinds of valuable things, even valuable little vaginas. But that's not what the fuck we were talking about.
Well, something good came out of that situation. That is turned around.
Yeah, well, this is such a duh, butthead. I mean, I said this in my goddamn videos. I pointed out that there's these value equations. I had my hands in front of me in the video. I remember doing it. And I talked about how once you have these values established, then you can do the balancing. But you can't do it until you have the fucking goddamn constants.
Where does the constant not exist in that scenario? If somebody watches it and observes it and acts on it, how is that interfering with the fact that it's happened? It's not.
Again, you're just not getting it. If we haven't established that kittens under a tree is a bad thing. That's what he was arguing, Frank. He was saying you can't say it's a bad thing. Okay? So there. That's the problem. Without that constant, without the establishment that there are these bad things that happen in the world, all value math is absolutely meaningless. All ethical questions become absolutely meaningless. Because then all you're talking about then is what you desire and what you want. You're never talking about what the implications are of you having. You stupid asshole.
As a matter of fact, what you're doing is a diversion. You're saying, oh no, nothing can come after the fact. Just focus on this one little narrow ink speck on the paper, and this is all that you can talk about because this is all that I know about. No.
Again, so you just barged into somebody else's house and drink their water and drink their stuff and eat their watermelons and do all that kind of crap and just say, I'm here, baby, you just put up with me. I mean, that's all you're doing here. You just, this is, you know, and then you have you ridicule. I mean, what the fuck is that? You ridicule people that you have barged in on, that you have perverted their argument, you've perverted their subject.
Isn't clearly a bad, horrible, case closed thing. But by your own doing and your own contrivance of insisting on all the variables being exactly as you set them,
and you're still breaking the simple rules, okay? The rule was there's no context. There's no context to this fucking suffering animal. There's just...
What do you mean there's no context? So, okay, here's where we end it then. You weren't trying to say that this was real in any way. You weren't trying to say that this was possible in any way. You weren't trying to say that this might exist on an alien world and somehow. You were saying there is no context, there is nothing connected, this is just me talking in a vacuum to myself, and I am right. Okay, you're right.
Yeah, I just don't know how you could have missed it this badly. I was just saying, imagine little kitty under tree. Don't imagine old lady that he ate the day before. Don't imagine all this other crap. Just imagine little kitty under a tree. That's all I was doing, Frank. Not that complicated. And can you figure out that little kitty under a tree suffering is not good? It's a bad thing. It's negative. It's a red number. It's gasoline burned by the engine. Yeah, it's the gasoline, Frank. Starts the negative fire. Alright, you know. So anyway. Yeah, you just really, you fucking drunk drived all over this video. You just really did. You just made a horrible fucking goddamn mess. Parking your car in people's living room. Anyway, enough said. Moving on, which will be the extension of the conversation to what else has value. We've established now that sentient creatures' suffering has value. Now we can talk about whether humans are 1 billion times more special than that suffering. Like a human suffering, like ow, I just hurt my hand. That's 1 billion times more important. You know, 1 billion little cows with prods up their ass. Yeah, but I'm a human and I'm special. Yeah.